Nagash, also known as the Great Necromancer, was the first practitioner and creator of necromancy, and is the most powerful magic user of all time, his power rivaling that of the ancient Slan and High Elf wizards from the dawn of time that fought in the First Great War against Chaos. He caused the complete destruction of the civilization of Nehekhara, that titanic engine of human achievement, and created the undead, also indirectly creating the first vampires. Although once a mortal man, Nagash became a lich, the most powerful form of undead, casting aside his mortal flesh in favour of magical power and an unmatched mastery over the arcane. He is many thousands of years old, and endured where others would have perished. During his absence, Nagash has sought one thing and one thing alone: absolute power over all things. He is relentless in his ambition for total domination over the world, and will stop at nothing to see his dreams realized. He controls an entire legion of followers, worshippers and acolytes who have done his bidding faithfully, serving him as a god and furthering his fell schemes. He has been one of the greatest threats the world has ever faced, and was only stopped at a great cost each time he rose, never being truly defeated. In his attempts to become a god, Nagash learned how to tap the power of magic into certain materials, and also constructed the Black Pyramid, the largest structure ever built by human hands. Its purpose was to draw the winds of magic south, so that he could use more magical power for himself to fuel his megalomaniacal dreams. Ironically, after thousands of years of constant setbacks, Nagash finally got what he wanted, although not before he was humiliated by the forces of chaos. Okay, so Nagash is possibly as close as you can get in the Warhammer universe to, like, one single bad guy character who's, the most one individual that is the most evil or has the most evil power. I know there's a lot of guys in the, unless you're talking about actual gods, like I suppose you could say Khorne does more evil than Nagash. If we're talking just about one human or humanoid person, Nagash has got to be at least up there. Off the top of my head, I can't think of someone who's, creating this amount of evil power. You know what I mean? And he keeps coming back. He's a real kind of, he's like the Bond villain of Warhammer fantasy. I mean, as for other undead people, obviously a lot of them are quite evil, but they're humans, they're not completely one-dimensional. But, vampires, like you have the whole Von Carstein and Isabella story where they're like really in love and they care about each other and stuff. So necromancy isn't necessarily evil, it's kind of just like gives people certain... It's a window to power, and you can't really judge someone for going into something slightly sketchy in order to get power. I mean, it's like dealing drugs or something like that. So yeah, these are all kind of amoral humans, as we all are in reality. Like they're just people that have made decisions that not necessarily everyone would make. But Nagash is a real psycho. Like, he's completely out for himself. He probably is actually a psychopath mentally, and he really, wants himself to be the only human left on the world. Basically, he's absolutely crazy. Although he's not a human anymore, he's a lich. But anyway, another example of undead people just being humans. There's a type of vampire called the Blood Dragon, which was founded by this guy called Abhorash, and he basically... Let me just read an extract for you. Abhorash came upon the lair of a great dragon, and against all advice entered it, engaging the beast in battle by himself, as Abhorash was seeking a worthy foe. Obviously this guy's a massive badass already at this point. When the battle ended, Abarash was triumphant 1v1 the dragon, and drank deeply from the dragon's blood. To his surprise, it cured his constant thirst. He maintained in his vampiric form, but had no need to drink blood any further. At that point, Abarash told his followers that his search had ended. He had found his answer. He commanded his followers to go back out into the world and master the arts of combat, and seek the blood of the strongest of foes so that they too might overcome their thirst. So this kind of shows you that there's a certain desire to not want to be a vampire as much. I mean, obviously they enjoy the powers that they get, but they don't like the vampire curse of the constant need to kill people and eat them. You know, they're not actually about that. They feel that desire, but it's more like a drug addiction than any real kind of actual mental will to be doing it. This isn't the same for all of them. Obviously, some of them probably love it. But, yeah, I'm just saying they're nuanced. They're like real humans, you know? Like, they're just people with different outlooks on things and different opinions. But, yeah, because they're immortal, they can train up until they're getting to the point where they're, like, incredibly good at fighting, and then they go out and try and kill a dragon so that they can lift the curse like Abarash did. And he's the founder of the Blood Dragons, which is the Blood Knights cavalry unit from the Vampire Counts in Warhammer Total War. So yeah, that's why they're so good and why they're good against large units. As well as this, you have just the fact that a lot of vampires just kind of live in the Empire society with the other humans, and you know, just enjoy the fine life that they can have in the cities of the Empire amongst other humans in human society, just kind of using their powers and their general high IQ that they seem to have to just be successful and get rich, and have some kind of eloquent arrangement with hired thugs to go stab people and drain their blood, and then send them carts of wine to disguise the blood, and yeah, they pretty much sorted. They can just have a nice, comfortable life in Empire cities. They're not trying to commit any mass genocide of humans at all. They're just kind of piddling along, having a nice life for themselves. Not saying they're not selfish, they're humans, but yeah, that's basically my main point. Now, Nagash, however, had always had his sights on something more than this. And being the founder of necromancy, I suppose this isn't surprising. I suppose it's bad luck for the whole world that Nagash was born 2,000 years before the time of Sigmar in the mighty civilization known as Nehekhara, because this was a civilization obsessed with death and obsessed with the preparation for the afterlife, essentially attempting to practice necromancy before it was invented. His father was King Ketep of the Third Dynasty, ruler of Khemri and all of Nehekhara. As a young man, he joined the Mortuary cult, a priesthood dedicated to the veneration of the dead and the magical prolonging of life. It's basically prototype necromancy, and became a leading figure in the cult. Nagash was ambitious, and despite rising to the rank of the High Priest of Khemri, the cult's highest position, he coveted his father's throne. It was only when a group of dark elves, who had washed up on the shore of Nehekhara after a battle with the High Elves, were brought to Khemri, that his quest for immortality proved fruitful. One among their number was a sorceress who revealed all of her knowledge of magic to Nagash. From her, he learned of the realm of chaos beyond the chaos wastes in the north, and of the winds of magic, and how they could be channeled. Unlike the divine magic of the priests of Khemri, based on communication with the gods, Nagash learned of magic that mortals could manipulate for themselves. He learned of Dar, and how it could be drawn to a location and condensed inside certain materials. This elf sorceress was extremely useful to Nagash, and he never would have found out about this dark magic if she had not enlightened him upon it. Soon, He learned all he could from her, and when she outlived her usefulness, Nagash murdered her companions, defeated her in a magical duel, and consumed her soul. He then proceeded to enact his plan to put himself on the throne. He brought dozens of weak and dispossessed nobles together, and gave them the ability to prolong their life. In return, they swore to serve him forever. Foremost amongst them was Arkan the Black, who became Nagash's second-in-command, and one of the most ruthless of Nagash's servants. After the death of their father, Nagash's brother, King Thutep, ascended to the throne. One night, Nagash slew his own brother, murdering him in cold blood and burying his brother's wife alive. The next morning, his hands still covered with Thutep's blood, Nagash claimed the throne of Nehekhara without opposition. Nagash used his knowledge as the basis for a new branch of magic, which he called necromancy. This magic greatly extended his lifespan, and during the centuries to come he mastered it, although he did not succeed in preserving his physical body, and it enabled him to reanimate the bodies of the dead. So he just remained animated and full of energy for years, as in centuries, while his physical body rotted down to the bones. Must have been absolutely disgusting, but you'd be too scared of him to really do anything. He ruled Khemri through fear, and with his power forced countless slaves to labour for 200 years to raise a massive pyramid of black marble. The dreaded, legendary Black Pyramid of Nagash, which he committed a great heresy in making, because he made it far larger and more imposing than the tomb of Setra the Imperishable, a testament to his hubris. Now, for a lot of people this is going to be kind of hard to relate to and understand how offensive this is, but Setra is essentially the Sigmar of Nehekhara. If Nehekhara is the Empire, he is Sigmar. He's united this entire land that was, like the Empire, split up into loads of different tribes. And although he was slightly more tyrannical than Sigmar, he is the unifier and the father of this huge civilization. And for Nagash, who's usurped his way into power anyway, to build this huge black pyramid, specifically to dwarf Setra's one, was literal heresy. One does not simply dwarf the pyramid of Setra the Imperishable, the King of Kings, High King of Nehekhara, Lord of the Earth, Monarch of the Sky, Ruler of the Four Horizons, Mighty Lion of the Infinite Desert, the Great Hawk of the Heavens, Majestic Emperor of Shifting Sands, Eternal Sovereign of Khemri's legions. Nagash used this dreaded, legendary Black Pyramid to draw the winds of magic from the far north down to the lands of Nehekhara, storing them there for his use, to aid them in his campaign, and to subdue the neighbouring kings. Bearing in mind the fact that Nehekhara is near the equator, there's naturally very little magic near there, so this is quite an advantage for him to have this. Nagash penned his knowledge and findings within 9 tomes made of human flesh, bound with dwarf hair and illuminated with human blood. These works became known as the 9 Books of Nagash. Others flocked to his promises of immortality and power. Dozens of nobles, as well as 1/3 of the Lich Priests, sided with Nagash. However, the other kings of the various Nehekharan cities were aghast with the reign of terror which Nagash had begun, and his disrespect of Setra, and railed under the terrible taxes that Nagash forced them to pay. Some 2 centuries after having been forced to witness what they saw as a blasphemy that would surely bring the wrath of the gods upon the blessed lands of Nehekhara, the kings of 7 other lesser cities allied themselves in order to remove Nagash from his throne. A powerful army was raised to march on the city of Khemri. Using his necromantic powers publicly for the first time, Nagash raised a vast horde of skeletons to destroy the attackers. In the death-obsessed culture of Nehekhara, this was recognized as the greatest of obscenities and a grave insult to the gods themselves. Hundreds panicked, terrified by the thoughts of battle versus the departed, who were sacred. Although many fled at the sight of the skeletal army, the forces of the other kings rallied, and Nagash was ultimately defeated, but not slain. Arkan gave his life to protect his master. Nagash fled to the northeast to plot his revenge. The priest kings, meanwhile, did their utmost to destroy everything Nagash had wrought. His works and many of his books were burned, and the cabal of acolytes that he had seduced to his service were put to the sword. The Arkan that gave his life to hold back the armies so that Nagash could escape is Arkan the Black, who we talked about earlier. He is the most loyal of the evil Nagash's followers, helping lead the coup that brought him to power. Arkan was also a great necromancer, and one of Nagash's most principal students. He also led great numbers of armies against Nagash's enemies, such as the priest kings that revolted against him. He launched a suicidal counterattack, giving Nagash the opportunity to escape, which held back the army of the Seven Kings, as it was called, for over an hour, using his feats of martial prowess and powerful sorcery. Finally, when Arkan fell in this suicidal attack, it was not to a hero's sword in single combat, but to a spear hurled by a nameless soldier. Arkan stared in horror at the shaft protruding from his chest, knowing that it had pierced his heart. With his dying breath, he threatened that a terrible curse would befall any who touched his corpse, and with that, he slumped to the ground. Within seconds, dark flames had consumed Arkan's flesh, leaving behind only a blackened skeleton. Whilst the rest of Nagash's followers were beheaded and burnt, none dared to risk desecrating Arkan's remains. Okay, I think we'll leave this fabulously powerful necromancer here at the minute. But this is not the end of Nagash for the Warhammer world, and this is not the end of necromancy, of course. This is merely the start of this form of magic that goes on to have quite an effect on the Warhammer world in general. Nagash even affects the kind of geography of the Warhammer world later on. But if you've watched my Skaven series, you'll know something about that. But this Sigmar series that I'm doing is about to collide with Nagash's storyline. So I think at the minute I'm going to do some more episodes of Sigmar, and I'll do another episode on Nagash soon, just to kind of recap and get it up to speed, and then we'll do an episode where their two stories collide, and that'll be like a special edition. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped for that. That's a nice little objective for me to have, and I hope you enjoyed this lore video. Thank you.